It's incredible how many people already showed up. Really nice to see all of you guys joining us for this workshop, going into a deep dive into how to evaluate or to improve evaluations. And yeah, today I'm here with Alex and Alexei. Really excited to have you guys in this workshop and to guide us through the complete workflow. Before I hand it over to you guys, just for everyone, please use the Q&A tool that you can find in the right corner to ask questions. It gives us just a good overview on how many questions there are, and we'll try to answer them whenever we can during the workshop. Just be aware that also after the workshops we have even more time to answer all of your questions, but we'll try to make it as interactive as possible. And please don't hesitate. There are no stupid questions. And yeah, with this, giving to Alex and Alexei.
All right, I'm just gonna kick us off then. So I'll just give a quick synopsis of what it is that we're building with Kitaru, and then Alex is gonna take us away into an example that we're gonna work through as part of the workshop today. So as many engineering practices, sorry, I think the day zero problem of how do I ship this piece of code is usually something that everybody gets very excited about, and is something that as part of a project you do very quickly. Like you want to ship an agent, so you build something, you see it's good enough, and you put it into production or production-ish, but you get users on it, right? Like you put your agent somewhere and then you see it in action. And so Kitaru is there to answer the question that comes after this, the day two question, or day one if we're going to count as software engineers should count. So how do I improve this thing now? How do I take the traces that are being logged into a tracing provider if I did things correctly when I set things up? Or maybe even just in your AWS logs that you store somewhere, or some database, or some JSON-L dump that you have somewhere. So how do I take all of this gold mine of data and use it to make my agent better? How do I get to the bottom of the problems that are happening in my production-ish setup? How do I figure out how to make it cheaper, how to make it faster? How do I even figure out that when I make a change, it's not going to start introducing regressions that I'm not thinking about? So all of these questions we ourselves had as we were starting to build our own internal agents, thinking about the problem more deeply. And that's what we built Kitaru for. And that's the example that we brought today. Alex is going to talk about it in a second, is going to walk us exactly through this sort of questioning of, I have an agent, I have traces, now what? What's the next step? And that's what Kitaru is there for. So over to you, Alex.
Thank you, Alexei. So yeah, what I'm going to do today is talk us through, basically we have an agent and we have some traces, and we're going to understand it a little bit. I will give a little bit of context. Let me just share my screen. I will give it a bit of context about the agent first, since you need, well, a little bit of context to understand it. Yes, this is here. Okay, so the agent is basically a kind of a customer support chatbot, and it follows like a relatively simple flow of things. Some kind of ticket or customer request comes in from someone. It possibly looks up an order relating to whatever things they bought from a particular website. It checks some rules. So it checks whether the thing needs a replacement or whether it needs to be escalated to some human. And then it checks, ideally, it checks some policy. There are some rules around, when we give refunds to people. And then it'll either refund, it'll replace an item, or it'll escalate to a human. And it has some tools that it can run, and so on. And I can give you a little example here. something that worked. So they have this concept of like a final sale, which is basically, yeah, if an item was in a sale, then there are slightly different behaviors. So someone ordered a linen shirt, which was in the final sale. Then the agent goes and looks up the order. They find the details about it. They see that it was delivered 28 days ago. So it's within the 30-day return policy. It's a defect, so it qualifies for the exception, and it's under $150. So we issue a refund because the order only cost $72. So there's a little bit of logic in terms of exactly what qualifies for a threshold. Of course, in your own agent, there's going to be probably quite a lot more complex logic often. Particularly for like open flows, like kind of customer service chatbots and so on. So you want to often make sure that your agent is actually applying whatever policies you have, because your agent might give a whole range of tools that are available to it to take action, but depending on lots of things, the agent, the LLM might return or might choose to follow those tools or not. So this is the agent we're going to go through. We do have an example like this in our repository. There's an examples folder. This is kind of an updated, an augmented version of it, but the form of it should look roughly the same. You see we have this traces folder, and there's some Langfuse traces from previous runs of this agent that we're going to start with. And I should say also in our documentation, so this is just docs.znml.io/Kitaru, we have a version of this kind of demo here in the guides. And we're going to walk through these steps. So first, just looking at the traces, importing them, then making some kind of judgment or hypotheses around them. Then we're going to suggest ways that we might want to evaluate them, write evals and so on. And then we're going to run some experiments to see whether, if we can fix problems that we find. So I'm just going to kick this off. One of the things that Kitaru does, and Alexei, feel free to stop me when I forget to say something. But one of the nice things about Kitaru is that we have MCP server and CLI commands and everything. So and a whole bunch of custom skills that will guide you through using the website. So that this is the pro version of Kitaru. This is a workspace. This is what you will see when you basically you register with Kitaru. You can load some sample data, or you can actually follow through and install our skills, connect to the MCP server, and even you can try out with your own traces and so on. So we're connected already to this workspace, and our agent is running a skill which is going to take us through this demo. If I just see where we are. So yeah, at the moment we're going to register our agent. So this is the agent code here, which we've already defined. We're going to start a worker. Workers are the things which basically allow whatever jobs or compute that need to run, those run locally. And we're going to import a bunch of runs. So I'm just going to kick that off. Alexei, has everything I said made sense so far?
Everything made sense so far. So maybe just to specify why you need to register an agent. So usually you might have multiple agents. You will want to do this sort of investigation across multiple agents. So you want to scope your traces to those agents and also have experiments within that agent scope and have different hypotheses within these. So this is mostly a scoping mechanism at this point. At a later point, we're also going to get then to what it means to actually point to the code.
So I'm just actually going to kick off that worker in the side. And now the worker is ready. The worker should show up somewhere here on the dashboard. Yeah, we've got an active worker. This is running on my local machine, but you can see its status. And here it's running an import job at the moment. you can see that DeepSeek has chosen to use the CLI. It does actually have the MCP commands. And this is my cat. He's come to join in the session. And the import is complete. And we can go back and look at the agent itself. And we can see actually the full population of traces. So these are basically reconstructed, or not reconstructed, they're traces which have been imported into a format that Kitaru knows and can represent. So you can import from LangFuse, from where else? From Braintrust. You can have custom JSON-L. We even have a skill. If you have some other tracing provider, it will write you a custom importer. But then it will allow you to view the traces as you expect, and yeah, see things that are going on in your agent. We have kind of annotation built in. I'll come back to annotation a little bit later, but while I'm here, if there's things that you notice, for example, you can say, oh, here, you can save little notes which are attached to bits of your the traces that you find. You can make notes on the whole session as a whole, or on specific nodes, or indeed on specific pieces of those nodes. Basically anything that you see, you should be able to make annotations on. And this is really useful because this is going to help the agent. This is going to help the agent understand like your taste on top of whatever the traces are. Because at the moment, what we've got here, we've got 30 traces. We can see some cost information here. But beyond that, we don't really know so much. And Kitaru has one thing which it's about to start using, which are evaluators. Kitaru comes with a bunch of evaluators built in. So these are things like whether it followed particular model definitions or model config that you have set, whether there are failures in your LLM calls. You can specify all sorts of things around which tools are allowed to be used, limits, resource budgets, ceilings to cost, time. So there's a whole bunch of things which are just kind of general evaluators that might be useful. And Kitaru generally, when you certainly within its skill, it will start off by running some of these evaluators against your traces. So if we go in and we look at a particular session, you can click here in the evaluations tab, and you can see it ran a bunch of them. So here you can see this run took 22.779 seconds. You can see, yeah, you can see other things about like none of the results were empty, and so on.
I would quickly interrupt here. There's one question, and I think that might be relevant for others as well. So how much of what you're showing is actually available in the open source version versus what we have here in our cloud version of this?
I think everything is available in the open source version, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, all the skills are open source. Everything in the dashboard is open.
I think that you're going to hit your limits when you go to multi-user settings in open source, just because you're going to have to start figuring out how to set up the users behind this. But all the things that you're seeing on screen should be available just like this in your local environment if you install launch the dashboard there.
So you can see I'm kind of reading this in the side, but the agent is basically looking through those evaluations and making its own assessment of whether we're getting any useful signal out of them. I think I read somewhere that everything passed, or everything was fine, structurally clean. So I think it's now thinking about what possible other evaluations might be interesting to use. And yeah, we have different ways of viewing your agent. I guess I can show you while we're there. So yeah, Kitaru comes with these custom evaluations, but you can also write your own. which I think is what we're going to be leading up to. You might there's lots of different ways of approaching evals, and certainly maybe towards the end of the workshop, I'd love to hear from people about whether they have other other ideas or approaches of doing things. So there is a little bit of a trend at the moment to try and want to have agents to do evals for you. There's also the option of you reading your traces and understanding your data better and so on, and then making these annotations and then letting things kind of failure modes emerge out of your data. Kitaru doesn't really take a strong opinion as to which is better, but our skills generally will encourage you to make contact with your data rather than taking decisions on your behalf. Okay. So so it ran, there's 3 different kind of groupings of evaluators. All of them passed. All of the traces are basically intact and there weren't any failures in them. So there's nothing interesting there. And did some things around tool health and so on. All of that was fine. It's now asking whether we should set some possible kind of ceilings for what is a reasonable cost. That's a reasonable cost and duration of the agent. Because you might imagine that above a certain level, it becomes no longer interesting for your user. So it's setting up 2 of our evaluators to specify limits. And there's also a fast path target, which is basically, this will be a really great target for us to reach. And it already says that there are 4 tickets, which will probably be flagged as part of this. So yeah, we're setting a cost budget here. This one has passed. The ceiling was 0.0029. And here you can see it's the results of the cost, and you can see whether it passed or failed your particular limit.
Just because we have a short moment right now, one of the questions that came up is more towards the problem that we chose here, and if a rule-based system wouldn't have been the better approach. Maybe you have an opinion here. I think generally my point would be that for workshops like this, it's usually works better to go for a very simple problem so you can show the bells and whistles around it. Probably with a system like this, I would also make it as a rule-based system, unless you're maybe in very high ticket items and you want to have some sort of, I'm not sure, some sentiment analysis in there to understand if maybe if you give this user a refund now, they're a high spender and they're going to keep coming back because you made an exception. Maybe you could make an argument around that. But I think for the sake of the workshop, I wouldn't pick too much through the specific problem we're tackling here, because it has to be simplified just because it's the nature of the beast of a demo.
Yeah, but I mean, you do often find, and certainly the model providers and frontier labs like encourage you to engineer as if the model can handle everything. So you will see in very commonly just let the agent handle it. It's smart enough as long as you specify the rule in some skill or whatever. In an ideal world, you wouldn't have a chat interface at all. You would just have a form that someone could submit, and then you don't get weird entries, and then you limit the scope of the kinds of problems you might be having. But I think chatbots are a thing, and people do want to do evals against them. So it's just a question of like, how can you put guardrails around that as it's working? And I should just say the agent at the moment is reading a bunch of tickets based on those evals that it ran, and it's thinking of some semantic evals. So this is basically, a lot of this is going to focus, as I mentioned earlier, on this question of choosing the action and the extent to which we go for a refund, replacement, or escalation. And a lot of it is going to go here around this kind of this step of like whether to issue the refund or not. Maybe we can look at some other examples to see where things. Yeah.
I think maybe what might help here as well is also to give an outlook what all of this information that we're extracting right now through these evaluators, how this will be useful for us going forward. Like why spend so much time on this? Why spend effort on this portion of the flow?
So you mean on evaluations in general, or like why are we?
Why this is the entry point here, or why is this something that we have to care about so early on?
I mean, I think it's just, I mean, at the moment we only imported 30 traces, but you can imagine that in a production setting, I mean, some people have millions of traces, right? So what you're trying to do initially, you're trying to make some kind of sense out of a big sprawling ball of stuff. And having some kind of general rules of thumb is a good idea to try and start to make order or sense out of this, to group things in certain ways. You could think about cost. You can say, are there any crazy outliers in terms of the traces that we have? But you can also think of other things. Is it calling 1,000 tools where all of the other agents only call 4 tools? So that's where these kind of custom evaluators come from. They're basically like a little grab bag of like common and easy things that you can think about. Quite soon you will kind of outgrow the utility of those, and you want to go into what we're going to talk about now, which is like your own custom evaluators. So we can see here, this is just a summary of what we did already. This fast path target, so this is like our best version of things. There are 4 possible things that could be improved here. And then it also read a bunch of traces, and it has some suspected problems where, here, for example, an archive hoodie was on the final sale. It was worn once and returned because it doesn't fit. But yet the agent issued a full refund. So what we're going to do is we're going to group these 5 traces into what we call a cohort, which is basically just a group of these traces that we can work with. I'll just kick that off. And because you don't necessarily want to run your experiments across all of your traces. Sometimes you might, but usually it's a good idea to be targeted. So that'll show up here in the cohorts.
Maybe for me to interrupt you here, I think we've thought about this a bit, why we wouldn't want to run our experiments across all of our sessions, but maybe it would be good to be explicit on this one as well.
Yeah, I mean, part of it is just a cost thing. Of course, not all experiments are going to be expensive to run, but some of them might be. Yeah, you want a kind of a smaller grouping of things, so you can just be clear what you're working with, I guess.
I think this fits perfectly. A question just came in. The traces will be in the thousands. Won't this be costly to run at scale? So I think this basically goes to what you just said. Yes.
And actually, I misspoke a bit. We're going to go into investigation now. And investigation is basically a flow, a kind of an annotation, a set of annotations that you go through as the user, that your coding agent, through its skill, can propose to you, and you can go and we're basically going to go and look at the examples that it came with, and we can click here, start reviewing. And so you see here it's the same session view, but we have a new kind of little modal which shows up here, which explains the problem here. So we have this final sale order should be refunded only for a defect. but this order is indeed final sale, but has no defect, and yet the agent issued a full $64 refund. Not really. We can give the verdict on the session. And the agent can propose these annotations and these kind of little pop-ups on basically anything within the window, I think text as well. And we can also just make random notes on the session while we're looking at things. So we've got 5 of these to go through. Here on this one, final sale items qualify for a refund when a defect is reported. Indeed, it is final sale, and there was a defect, so the agent refunded it, 105. Seems correct. Here, final sale item with a defect is eligible for a refund. It's final sale, and it reported the torn sleeve. Yes, so acceptable. Just a couple more. Defect exception should apply across categories. Also seems like it made the right decision here. And here we have a defective item that qualifies for a full refund regardless of final sale status. It's not final sale. The customer reported a hole in the shoe, so that's a defect. So I have a feeling I got one of these wrong. Obviously, for your agent, you would be like an expert on the actual rules and things that the logic of your agent and this investigation view is something which your domain experts should be able to kind of use as well. And yeah, you have a kind of a view of like where the verdicts were in that particular investigation.
Yeah, I think here I would also highlight the fact that usually this is going to be something that the domain experts are going to go through. So you will, using skills, or someone in your company using skills will prepare these investigations on a batch of sessions, and then you're going to hand this over to a domain expert for the specific. This can be an accountant, this can be someone who is responsible for that specific part of the returns process, and then you let them do that work of very guided going through these things and figuring out where things went right or wrong, because you as the agent builder might not have that expertise for that specific agent.
Yeah, no, for sure there are things which a random coding agent or whatever is not able to understand your full use case or what your taste or particular limits are. These things in terms of like the rules of whether it gives a refund or not, you might understand like in a more fine-grained detail exactly what is possible. Maybe something needs to be changed in the rule system when you see customers hitting a certain problem over and over and over again. So what it's going to do now is basically it's going to take this example where something was problematic and there was an escalation in the wrong direction. It's going to create a special custom evaluator for this, and it's going to write it somewhere. So that's going to be working now. Alexei, any questions come in?
No additional questions right now, but there's a comment in the chat. This is more about if we have a skill for updating from the older version of Kitaru pre-0.22.0 to the current version, if we have something there.
I think since they work quite differently, I would be interested which bits of old Kitaru that person was using, because yeah, V2 does quite different things and behaves in a slightly different way.
I think that's for those joining the call who have not experienced the old version of Kitaru. We were more focused on the durable execution layer of the agentic product, but we just got increasing feedback from all of our users that this sort of investigation bit, experiment bit was the most useful to them. That's why the newest version of Kitaru now goes more into detail there.
Nice. So our agent, as you can see here, wrote a kind of a custom evaluator, which it's now working on the side to register. It even wrote a test, going above and beyond today. And basically, what it's looking for is like some words in the response, which might look indicate that something is a defect. Again, this is this policy that we're trying to check. And I think now it should.
Before you keep going here, maybe this is a good time to do a check-in of what have we done so far? What are the learnings that we've extracted from the work we've done? And what is our goal, just so that we keep everyone aligned?
Sure. So what we've done is we had our Pydantic AI agent here in our code. We had a bunch of traces, Langfuse traces, which we imported into Kitaru. We had 30 traces here. Then what we did is, together with the agent, we explored a little bit what's going on in the agent in terms of cost, duration, tool calls, and so on. So these are all of the evaluations that we ran across them. And then what we did, we had a little investigation here where we, together with the agent proposed some possible things which were going wrong with certain traces. And then now what we're doing, we're kind of crystallizing this together into a custom evaluator, which will allow us to run experiments against it. At some point, this should show up here. Here, we have our custom evaluator, which is the final sale refund. So this is the code that you saw in my local window. Yep. Okay. So so it had that custom evaluator, and then it ran it against our cohorts. One of them failed, so that was the one which we already noticed. 26 passed, and 3 were unresolved. This means wasn't able to figure out, basically. So we can look at the cohort that was created. So this is the grouping of 5 sessions. These were the 5 possibly problematic ones. Here is the one that failed. And this is the results that came in from that final sale refund. And now we're going to ask it to create an experiment. And basically an experiment is, let's say we do notice that, this is that there is this problem with it offering refunds when things are final sale. What we might want to do is then update something in our agent to try and fix the problem, basically. And Kitaru allows you a number of ways to intervene in the agent. So you can change the system prompt. You can change the way you can change the model. You can use kind of some custom rules around how tools are called to be able to possibly try different things in terms of how your agent is behaving. But the idea is that we're going to change something about how our agent works, and then basically hold the 2 things together: our baseline that we imported, as well as a fresh run that we replay. So what it's doing right now is basically seeing, what can I exactly do? What can I update? So yeah, we can do replay, changing the model and the system prompt. I suspect it's going to want to make an update to the system prompt, basically adding in a little bit more logic. But of course, you could change your code in your agent. You can do basically anything you want to. If you change code in your agent, it would create a new agent version here that then you could replay against the original baseline.
Just because you just mentioned it, there's one question: is replay and experiments the same thing, or what's the difference there?
So experiments consists of a bunch of replays against some base, plus whatever whatever the config or like custom things you injected in. So
and
I'll just
follow-up question just popped up as well. What does a replay mean then? Just so that
I mean, it means rerunning the agent together with some kind of potentially you just want to rerun it without any changes, but then you might want to switch out a model. You might want to switch out something in the system prompt. You might want to change some text in a skill. Yeah, there's lots of things or you might just want to change something in your code.
But important here is you replay a session. So you take the same input that you got once before, and you replay that session that you had, either with changes or without changes. But it's about that session context as well, right?
Yes. And so here, as I guessed, it's going to, instead of just this kind of generic one line, we've added a little bit more specifics about what to do when you have a final sale order, which was the problem which it found. So if I go here into experiments, an experiment should show up. So this is about the final sale. And now it's running replays for these 5 sessions. And as they come in, scores should come in. And then it should be able to, for the specific evaluators that we set up, and I think you can specify, yeah, there's multiple evaluators here that are running for this replay. We can then see that, yeah, what the results are against, against what we are interested in. So this final sale refund, 4 of them have run. So these were 4, I guess, were originally passed, and here now you can see that it passed, whereas previously it failed. So that's good. So it does seem like the system prompt change improved this, and obviously we had a few others that previously were passing. So sometimes when you change things in system prompts or you change the model, maybe you want to make your agent run cheaper, so you use a cheaper model. Suddenly things can start failing which were previously passing. So it's good to have checks on this. And yes, so the agent is just going to read through the results now. But I think I showed you the main one. We can also look at a specific example, and we can see what changed. I would be interested in which of the ones. So 35 is the interesting one. So I can click here and I can click compare, and so I can see like basically the diff between the two. So system prompt for the one which worked, you can see we added this little bit on the end. The number of tool calls went down, and well, here it's just telling us we had a different tool policy. And you can see the results of these evaluators side by side. You can see diffs in terms of the cost. It cost 9% more, and so on. And you can see difference in the inputs and the outputs. The output, I guess, we would expect to be different.
So as an agent builder, what would I do with these learnings now? Like what have I gained?
I mean, you've gained an understanding about what was going on in your agent that you kind of came to through your investigation, and then you've baked that down into a little cohort, which kind of collapses the specific problem that you were dealing with. And by the fact that we have an experiment now, which is set together with specific evaluators that you've run, this is something that you can also run in your CI/CD, right, to make sure that you're not making regressions when because obviously this won't be the last change that you make with your agent. Yeah, that's kind of you both kind of increased your understanding of what's going on in your agent, and we also have now this custom evaluator that we can use kind of going forward wherever we want. Yeah.
Right, thank you.
So what it's suggesting now that I'm just going to let that kind of run in the background, and maybe we can switch to some audience questions. But it's going to take a look at the cost and the yes, it's going to take a look at the cost and the number of tool calls or duration, and it's going to try and make some ways to improve these things. So I'm just going to let that run in the background, and probably by the end of the at the end of the session, that might be done. Alexei, any questions?
All right. Yes, the Q&A is filling up. So one of them was, are cohorts similar to data set in a certain manner? In
Yeah.
my opinion, a data set is a fit for solving a specific problem. Is it the same meaning with cohorts?
Yes, as long as yes, it's an immutable grouping of sessions, so it's kind of like a mini data set, I guess. Your data is, the bigger, wider kind of tranche of your data is in your traces, in your tracing provider.
And the next one is, does the agent have any guardrails for the case where two verdicts disagree, or is that where human would need to verify the cohort first? I assume it's agent, the skill that you're using right now inside of your coding agent is meant.
So this one is a kind of a custom guided tour skill. So it's not that hard-ass about like the extent to which it encourages you to be thorough. But we have a Kitaru investigation skill, which is very thorough, and generally would try to encourage you to be, more systematic or like more precise about how things work. In terms of how, obviously there's kind of a rich science of like annotations and what happens if you have multiple annotators who disagree about the same things. And there's statistical and non-statistical ways of resolving these things. But in the end, if there's a conflict between different rules, that's something that you'll need to solve at the domain level. Rather than necessarily something that's not something which your agent is magically going to be able to make a decision for on your behalf.
Or something you would want your agent to make a decision on. I guess that's where human taste is the last bastion.
Yeah.
All right, then another question from Sanjay. Is custom evaluator similar to LLM as a judge? How do you evaluate your newly created custom evaluator?
Yes, so you could have an LLM as a judge as part of a custom evaluator, and we do allow for that. It's probably not what you want to do. If you can find a way to evaluate it deterministically, you should, because A, it's going to be cheaper and faster, and if you can avoid paying for like extra random LLM calls, you should. So that is possible. There is, and if you use the Kitaru investigate skill that we have, you can create, it will encourage you to create a custom evaluator. And then what it will do is it will show you, it will create a cohort and you'll do some annotation, and it will check actually whether your annotations match up with what the evaluator was suggesting. So you do need to do alignment between your own judgment and the evaluator itself. And, I guess if your agent is like very critical and needs like complete precision, then you will go through a few rounds of that. If it's less important, if it's an internal agent, these are all things that you have to kind of decide internally.
Perfect. Next one is, how do new agent versions get into Kitaru? Is that a manual or automatic process?
You register them basically, or your agent registers them for you.
Manual-ish, depending on how agentic your workflow locally is, I guess.
Yeah.
Then I think the next one is about, maybe I'll quickly answer this one. I noticed that pull requests for Kitaru project are currently restricted to collaborators. Could you share a bit about the reasoning behind the setup and whether there's a process for external contributions? Right now, we don't have that process. I think the last 3 weeks, we were very quickly working towards our launch that we had. So it's a time when the ground was moving very fast and we didn't want to frustrate external contributors who would build something against a moving API. Now that we've launched and already have a few minor versions on top of that out, I think that's going to change, but we haven't decided yet exactly when we open that up. If you want to contribute, I think you can also communicate with us over on Slack, and we can figure something out. But it's not meant to stay closed.
And for sure, you can open up issues and stuff if there are things that you notice. And yeah, I think we can always add collaborators. I think just as many open source projects are finding, like it's very easy to kind of create pull requests, which may or may not be kind of aligned with whatever is going on within the core team and so on. So yeah, it's good to have a conversation first. In general, we found, and I'll just interrupt the questions for now. So there was a bunch of things going on in the background, but basically we, if I go and compare these two things, we add a little bit of extra thing to the system prompt, which was its hypothesis of how to reduce cost and the number of tool calls. If I go down here, I should see, yeah, it cost 50% less here, at least 70% less output tokens. Tool calls was one less. So we improved efficiency in terms of tool calls and cost. Of course, most fixes to agents and so on are not going to be so simple, but that was just kind of an idea of, I think you can get inspiration from that in terms of how this kind of agent plus Kitaru's tools collaboration does allow you to do things like improve efficiencies around cost, as well as just latency and so on.
If there's time for more questions, I'm fine. I'm finding more.
Yes, great.
So maybe one quick one. Does replay also work with multi-turn sessions, or is it just single turn for now?
Multi-turn sessions. So yeah, I guess it depends how you define your agent, right? Alexa, you work quite a lot with this with the importers. Yeah, how does that work in Kitaru?
So generally, when you import sessions from your tracing providers, there's many layers of hierarchy that you would see there. You can have spans that are just one turn of agent plus tool call. You can then marry these together into sessions that span multiple tool calls and LLM calls. And then, like the question from Stefan asks, you also have multi-turn sessions. And I think the problem with multi-turn sessions is always that the second you change something in the first answer that the agent does, the user interaction would look different. So if you want to do true replays with multi-turn sessions, I think that's currently not something we support as is, just because you would have to write your own simulation for the user behavior. I think, Alex, you shared a great blog post with me about this once from, I forgot what the company is, that set up this whole internal engine of simulating user behavior. DoorDash, exactly. They have a good blog post on this and how they had to set up a whole system for how to handle this specific thing.
I pasted the link in case you're
I don't know how you got this link so fast. That's insane.
The tip of my tongue.
Then there's another question about running this in the CI. What does that look like? Do we have a golden data set in Kitaru that you download into the CI, run there, and then track the score in Kitaru? Or what? How would we imagine this?
I'd say it's very, very different per company. Everyone's going to have their opinion about this. Obviously, I think you do want to curate a golden set if you are keeping this, because it might end up slowing down your CI system. It may, at a certain point, not be useful to be running so many evals. Yeah, again, depending on the specific use case you have, and different people are going to want to run their evals in different ways. There's this big trend now to try and run your evals in basically RL environments. so in Harbor or with verifiers or stuff like that, that's something which we're thinking about a lot, about possibly the ability to export your evaluations and so on in your experiments as Harbor environments. But yeah, it's really gonna differ depending on what your needs are. But yeah, it's a good place to start, I think, to start with the problems you have, solve them, fix them, and then save some kind of small nucleus of that as a kind of a regression test against your agent.
But I think generally the question already goes in the right direction, that at least that's how I think about it as well, is every time I make a PR, it's an experiment and I would like to run it as an experiment. And before I ever let that code touch my production environment, I want to run it through whatever my golden data set is. And maybe depending on the change I make, I should be able to select how large of a test run I want to do. But before any of my code changes hit production, I want to test it to be sure there's no regressions.
I can also
maybe even add to it. Right?
Yeah, I can also think of scenarios where you may have none of these things running in your CI at all, right? So another use case which we're heading towards supporting is kind of general purpose coding agents. And so what you might want to use Kitaru for there is like optimizing the setup of your coding agent, which maybe is solving, I don't know, Math Olympiad problems or whatever it is that your crazy agent is doing. And there it's not so much you're basically hill climbing, and you want to have a system or a way of kind of keeping all of the evals which are going to allow your agent or yourself working in collaboration with your agent to improve on some particular goal. So there, maybe the role for CI/CD is maybe slightly different.
There's another question. Are we planning on supporting or interacting with the dataset and experiment abstractions in LangFuse, BrainTrust, Logfire, etc.?
So I think what this is getting at is like the ability to import directly from the API.
I think maybe it's a step further, because right now it's you do an export of traces from these providers, and some of these providers, and there's a lot of movement there, I guess, are adding these things like dataset and experiment and these abstractions on their side. And currently we don't map that back to Kitaru.
Yeah, I mean, on it's not currently on our roadmap. It could be. One of the problems with this is like obviously every tracing provider has a different idea about how to represent data. Even that problem you were talking about linking multi-turn sessions. Some of them get represented in very different ways. Our importers should be able to potentially handle that. We could maybe even have a custom importer which imported from a dataset object.
Generally, when you export traces from these providers, they also add all the metadata they can into that JSON. That's why they're usually so hard to read. There's all the possible information you could possibly want about a trace is all just in this one JSON. And so our importers are flexible enough that you can join things on arbitrary keys that are in arbitrary locations inside of these JSONs. That's one step we took to be a bit forward compatible to these sort of features requests. But it's definitely something we're also very happy to discuss with you. So feel free to join our Slack and get into a discussion with us. We also really thrive on your input in steering our product. There was some questions about V1, and I fear that we're running out of time. So if it's possible, and if you had a question about this, reach out to us on Slack. We'll be happy to talk you through this, of like how to get your Kitaru, your previous Kitaru flows into the current version. There's definitely a lot of overlap that we can give you with the adapters that we currently have. And there's some things that we're working on. So feel free to reach out there. Then I think the last thing out of chat I'm going to take is from Thibault. One suggestion: it could be valuable to add a replay feature that runs the same session multiple times. This could help surface non-deterministic behaviors such as hallucinations that may only appear across repeated runs. And I know, Alex, that you love this comment.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, yeah. You want to be able to know that replays are doing what it actually is meant to, basically, or like that a replay is a valid replay. Like, was the change, did it happen just because it's an LLM and LLMs do weird things, or was it actually because of some change that you made? So yeah, that for sure is yeah, we want Kitaru to be something that gives you kind of real and valid results, and doesn't allow you to kind of fool yourself in thinking that changes that you made maybe are real when they're not.
It's definitely something we've talked about a lot. This has been one of our internal discussions, if this should be the default or not. That's why I had a little bit of a smile when I was reading this. But it's definitely a trade-off between how much value can you put into the output and how much are you willing to spend to get there, because each one of these is gonna cost you something. So with that, I would let you wrap it up, Alex.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess we all saw how Kitaru works. I encourage you to sign up to Kitaru. I think it is cloud.kitaru.ai, if I'm not misspeaking. And you can get a free workspace to try it out. You can run, see sample traces, run our skills and so on. And yeah, also hook it into your own agents. That would be really, really great. And let us know what you find. Thanks everyone for showing up.
Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you guys.
Bye.
Bye-bye.